Needham High School social studies teacher Laura Magno took advantage of summer break to learn more about the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II by participating in the National Endowment for the Humanities Heart Mountain Educator Workshop. More than 14,000 people of Japanese descent were confined at Heart Mountain in Wyoming, and this one-week place-based workshop provided teachers with a variety of materials that can guide them in developing lessons to address that period of history. Magno received a grant from the Needham Education Foundation for this trip.
During World War II from 1942 to 1945, the U.S. government incarcerated about 120,000 people of Japanese descent in isolated camps, a policy initiated by President Franklin Roosevelt via executive order shortly after the Pearl Harbor attack. The Heart Mountain Camp was one of the 10 internment facilities across 7 states in the western U.S. Laura Magno, who teaches 10th grade world history at Needham High School, said it was a period of history many people know very little about, including herself.
It wasn't necessarily anything I learned about in my own high school experience. This was an opportunity to learn and have a much better understanding of what happened to the 120,000 Japanese American citizens from 1941 on.
Participants had a chance to see the harsh conditions for the incarcerees on the site.
The barracks were put up in a couple of weeks. They were not insulated at all. They were kind of just 40 feet by 120 of this almost kind of like plywood slapped together. In the summer, it's incredibly hot. We were there in the summer, and it was pretty intense. We stayed, some of the programming was in the barrack, and then I imagined in the winter it would be absolutely freezing. So to physically experience what it's like, even for just a small amount of time, you have a little bit more empathy and understanding of what the Japanese American citizens went through.
The Interpretive Center, serving as a museum, exhibits photographs, artifacts, oral history, and other interactive elements. But Magno says the highlight of the trip was hearing first-hand stories from the survivors.
It makes it more real. It's exactly what we want to be doing for our students, that even though this is, something that happened 80 years ago, you're looking at and hearing the stories of someone who experienced it, who has a vivid memory of what it was like, and honestly, it was very moving. The whole point of me going out there was to have a better understanding, a deeper understanding, to empathize, and that's all, of course, things I want my students to be able to do. So if I can try to, in any way, try to share my experience on a more personal level, have students connect, they can hopefully appreciate this topic on a deeper level.
The trip opened up lots of questions Magno wants to discuss with her students.
The bigger question of what Americans should do during a time of war, during a time of fear and uncertainty is certainly a broad question that I think we need to analyze and look. It's a question about analyzing how we should also treat our fellow citizens. So 2/3 of all of the 120,000 people that were incarcerated were American citizens. No hyphen, just American citizens, and without due process and through a violation of their constitutionality, were forced through executive order from a Democratic president into these incarceration camps. And so I think it lends itself to asking a lot of questions. Was that fair? Was that constitutional? How do you, as a president or a government or a society balance, national security needs with defending people's liberties, and are those always at odds? And then, of course, not to be cliche, but these are our future leaders of the world. So if you're going to send our high school kids off to make these decisions, hopefully they've thought about it and dealt with it. I think, if you're looking long term as well, it certainly has a connection to anti-Asian hate. America has a very long history, starting with, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean immigrants coming over in the United States in the 1800s, looking at immigration exclusion acts and how you can see a thread, a historical thread between the fear of Asians then to even now and talking about current events. So it is, not just broader questions about society in terms of how the government should treat people, but also society.
For the Needham Channel News, I'm Yu Xiaoyuan.